have seen me making some posts about it, and it's because we have a really special guest. She's an MVP all the way from Canada, and she's someone who, if you go on our blog, it's just because I don't want to squeeze into our time. I'm going to share our blogs and some other things you need to catch up on her at different platforms you can reach her. You will see a lot of very insightful, very amazing tips, especially on Power Query, which is why I'm so excited about our session today, because I know that anything she's going to share with us are things you will not easily get different on the typical Excel site. So without wasting too much time and detracting and taking time from the time our guest has for us, our profile is already here. I'm going to share this link so you can read more up on the profile, and I'm going to call up our special guest, Celia Alves. So thank you very, very much for the privilege, and the stage is yours.
The privilege is mine, Michael. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I was born in Africa. Did you know that? I was born in Angola, so I have a special feeling for the African continent, and hopefully I'll go back sometime later.
It's a real pleasure to.
Yeah.
In fact, maybe you come around. Have you been to Nigeria?
No, yeah, I was born in Angola, left when I was 3 years old, and never went back to Africa since then. So maybe, maybe in the future, it's in the plans. I would like to visit and know where I'm coming from. I know that's totally different culture, and everything is different. Not only the culture, the weather, everything. So.
Yeah. Good thing. I'll always let you be aware of Microsoft is trying to do some events globally that they allow us to invite people outside the country, and they make it easy for the logistics. So I'll keep feeling good. Thank you.
That's good. Okay, so can I start my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Just a second here. There. I'll talk a little bit about myself, and then just so that people know where they can find me. And then we'll go to the topic right away. So, okay, you should be seeing my slides there. And okay, so my name is Celia Alves, or if you want to say my name in Portuguese accent, Celia Alves. I am Portuguese. Like I was saying, I was born in Angola, but lived in Portugal most of my life. In 2013, I moved to Canada with my husband and children. I am at the moment an Excel business solutions developer. I also received the award, the MVP by Microsoft. My company is Solvent Excel Consulting, where I develop custom solutions for companies based in Excel. It's mostly about automation with Excel, and that can include any feature in Excel, formulas, data validation, all that is part of an automation, and then it can be VBA, it can be Power Query. There are other things to explore in the near future, and I know you are more advanced in that stuff than I am, Michael, like Power Automate and things like that. I haven't worked with that a lot yet. But with Power Query and Power Pivot and VBA, there's a lot of nice things that we can do for automation. My background is in mathematics and education. I studied in Portugal, University of Lisbon. And then from there, I went to be a mathematics high school teacher. I did that for almost 20 years until 2013 when I came to Canada. And when I came, I wanted to do something else. I was not interested in restarting a teacher's career from scratch. And after some events, I discovered there was a demand for Excel expertise. And I started to study a lot and applying what I was learning to the different problems in the companies I was working for. And at some point, I ended up becoming independent because the work that I do is about automation. And so once things are automated, they don't need me anymore unless I want to do another type of work that is not Excel. But the Excel is what I like to do. So in most of the cases, my work is temporary work, let's call it. It's on a project basis. And then after that, it's about maintenance mainly, but not full time anymore. Recently, I went back to my teacher's roots with my YouTube channel, where I have been teaching all the stuff that I've been learning throughout the past years. I teach a little bit of VBA, mostly Power Query is what I like most, but in fact, I try to teach a little bit of everything to help people starting to understand how to bring all the pieces that Excel offer us, bring all those pieces together to build custom solutions for the problems they have to solve. Here in Toronto in 2019, I decided to create a meetup group for Excel. It's the Msxl Toronto meetup group, similar to this community that you run here on Meetup, Michael. And I do invite everyone to take a look at the group. It's free to join. The sessions, maybe they are a little bit late for you, depending on the time zone you are located at, but you can check, and then the recordings are also available on YouTube. So feel free, there's always speakers from all different places in the world, high expertise, many different topics, so feel free to check that out. Okay, so today we are going to talk about Power Query, particularly tips for productivity in Power Query. But it's important to know, the audience here, what is the expertise that you have, or the type of skills, the type of involvement that you have with Power Query. And it's important that you tell me in which stage do you think you are, if you are just starting or if you have more experience with it, because then I can guide my presentation depending on your answers. So if you want to use the chat and type number 1 there to say, I use it almost every day, or number 2, I tried a few times but didn't go far. Number 3, I only use queries created by other people. Number 4, I never used Power Query. Number 5, what's Power Query? Meaning, I don't even know what that is. And it's totally fine. So we have a 2, almost every day, a 4, I never used Power Query, and a 5, and another 1, and the 4. So we have a mix. Thank you for answering, by the way. Thank you. And we have a mix of different answers. So it means that my presentation should be good for all of you. So I hope I have something for all of you, meaning I will start with an example of what Power Query can do, so that you maybe get curious and then you can explore more outside of this session. And then we will talk more about other more particular things, and I wouldn't say advanced, but maybe details that we don't think about them when we are starting. Only later, when we get some experience and come across different problem situations, we can start to think about some details like performance. How can I make this better? How can I make something to work that I cannot find in the buttons that are available in Power Query? So I'll talk a little bit about that, but keeping in mind that the topic is productivity. So that's the main topic today. Okay, so next slide here. So that's our agenda. We will talk about one example in Power Query. I will touch the topic of enable background refresh property, why that is important. Power Query editor, we will go through some of the tools that we have in the Power Query editor to help us organizing our queries and recycling the work that we have done. And we take advantage of that without having to repeat everything if we need the same type of query. Thinking about productivity again. Some examples of pitfalls that we need to be aware of. And then a little bit of M code. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to touch all the topics I mentioned here, but if not, then we can. I can provide you with a presentation with some links to content that you can explore. And then performance, if we have time. Okay. So first tip about being productive with Power Query is use Power Query, as simple as that. So it may seem a little bit strange, but the Power Query itself is a tool for productivity. And the example that I'm going to show you now shows exactly that. Is one simple example. We will talk about how can we import all the data from one folder. How can we import the data from all the files? And then we will talk about these other topics, enable background refresh property, and other things that maybe it's best to mention when we get there. Okay, so let me bring my File Explorer here so that you can see. The first example is about monthly reports. Oh, and Michael, if this or anyone attending the session, if at some point there's too small, the screen is too small, let me know in the chat. And Michael, I'm not looking at the chat all the time, but if you see any question coming or any comment that deserves my attention, feel free to interrupt. So feel free to anyone to type in questions and comments, and we will try to address them as possible. And if the Zoom is too small, let me know, and I'll do my best to zoom in a little bit. So in this folder here that says monthly reports, we have 5 reports. Let's imagine they are monthly reports for some kind of sales products. They are not too complicated. They are not too long either. It's like 100, 200 rows, each one of these reports. And we have a couple of columns. Let me go up. We have a couple of columns here with the date, client, that includes the client ID and the name together in one cell, one column only. Product code, quantity, unit price, and the payment type. There's also a couple of rows here at the top, and these files are CSV. When we open the file, a CSV file is, in fact, for those of you who may not know, it's a text file. So if I go right-click, open with Notepad, we see that this is not an Excel file. Let's see it open on my other screen. Let me bring it here to you. So this is, in fact, how that file looks. Most of the programs that deal with data, databases or not, accounting programs, HR, inventory, almost all of those programs offer you the possibility to export the reports as a CSV or Excel file. When you export as a CSV file, you have a file looking like this. CSV stands for comma separated values, and each comma will separate one field. So for example, here in this row, we have the names of the columns, date, client, product code, etc. And there's a comma separating each one of those. And then each row is a record, and the same thing. There's a comma separating each field. Okay, the values from each field. From in some countries where the comma is used as the decimal separator, so in North America we use the dot as decimal separator, and so the comma can be used for other purposes. When the comma is a decimal separator, for example, here in the price, we would have 33,95. So then we cannot use the comma to separate the fields because then it would be confusing. In those situations, your CSV files may probably have a semicolon as a separator for the fields or any other type of separator. So, but what happens is that when we double click these type of files, Excel is prepared to open the files and separate. In most of the cases, it will separate the data by columns. Sometimes it doesn't do that, and then Power Query will be a good tool to make that, to take care of that work. Okay, so we have 5 files. Each one has dates of 1 month. In this case, is the January file. And we imagine that we want to put all the information together. Every month, someone generates this report and puts a new report here. And we want to find a way of combining all the files together in an easy way. Before, we were probably using VBA if we could to do that. If not, we would probably be opening files and copying from here, pasting from there, and all that stuff manually. But today we have Power Query. It's quite easy to learn. If you have not used it, I do encourage you to try it, because it's a no back journey. Once you try it, you won't go back. It's quite addictive, and it's very satisfying to use that kind of program because it generates results so quickly and so easily. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut these files out of this folder. I'm going to create here other. I'm going to put the files there so that we start with just January and February here, okay, as an example. And then we will test by adding more files. So imagine, like I said, that we want to create, import all the files together. I'm going to create a file here that I'm going to call all reports. It's a blank Excel file. And from here, we are going to connect to that folder and tell Power Query, hey, bring everything you find there, but just not bring everything messy. You need to put organize columns very nicely. There's rows there that I don't want. There's columns there that I don't want. And I'm going to explain Power Query exactly what I want. And then from there, Power Query will be able to repeat that task over and over every time I need it. Okay, Power Query is here in the Data tab, where it says, that portion here that says Get and Transform Data is where we have Power Query. So just a little bit of zoom here. Oops, not there. Here, all this group is for Power Query, and then also here the refresh all button, the queries and connections. So this group here also is important for Power Query users. Okay, what we are going to do is come to this button, Get Data, and then first we do choose from file, and then from file we have all these options, and we will choose from folder. See that you have many other options you can import from databases, Access, Azure, from even Power BI. If you have your models there, you can bring things from there. So you have a lot of different options, connectors to where you can find your data. But in today's case, we are going to do Get Data from file and then from folder. Going to zoom out. Okay. Let me bring the path. So here I could go find the folder by clicking through my folders, but I'm going to just paste it there. Oh, it's not working. Okay, so maybe I changed some folders after. So let me see here. We are here, here, and the monthly reports is where we have the files. Okay, so I reach the folder I want to connect to. I do open. And now, first thing that Power Query gives me is kind of a report of what's in that folder. I know it's maybe a little bit small, but I cannot do much at the moment. Like here, I cannot do zoom. I can see that there's two files. Oh, and I said it was a folder. In this case, it's CSV files in the folder. It could be Excel files. In this case, they are CSV files. And I can have several options. I always like to do transform data instead of combining right away, because I may need to explain certain things before I go in. So it opened this window just in another screen. This is Power Query Editor's window. So you have this tool inside your Excel if you never used it, as long as your Excel is at least 2016. If it is before 2016, 2010, or 2013, it's possible to install Power Query as an add-in. You need to look for that in the Microsoft's website. You can Google download Power Query to Excel 2013, for example. You should be able to find that. Otherwise, from 2016 on, it's in that tab, Data tab. And if you are using Microsoft 365, is the best option because it has more features and it's also constantly being updated with new options and new features. Okay, so this here, it's the Power Query editor, like I was saying. Here on the right, we have the name of the query, and then here we will get all the steps that we do. They will be recorded and showed here, almost like recording a macro with VBA. Here on the left is where I can find my queries. At the moment, I only have one query. That's the one that we just started. Power Query automatically decided to name the query after the folder because I'm connecting to the folder monthly reports. Power Query gave the same name to the query. If we wanted, we could change that. That's okay. And here at the top, it's the formula bar. If you don't see it, you can come to view and then check mark here, formula bar, so that you have these available. And it's very important to keep an eye on what's going on here, because although we can do a lot of things in Power Query without learning any coding, the truth is there is a language, programming language associated with Power Query running in the background, being generated for us in the background. It's the M language. And in the formula bar, we can see the type of code that is being generated. And it is very important that we keep an eye on that and start paying attention. If you are starting with Power Query, it's not so important that you worry too much about that in the beginning, because there are other things that you can learn, but then gradually make an effort to keep an eye on the bar, because you will learn a lot of things. And most importantly, we will talk about that, you can avoid some mistakes, because sometimes Power Query does not program in the code exactly what we wanted it to do. Okay. So in this moment, it's saying, oh, you have two files there. Okay, there's information about the files, like the name, the extension, the date it was created and modified, and other things here. We don't need that. We just need this column that has the content. So I'm going even to right click and choose remove other columns. Okay, and then I can use this button to expand the content of what is in each file. And to do that, Power Query, since I'm pointing to a folder, Power Query says, hey, there's many files here. I need you to explain me just with one file what you want me to do with that. And then assuming that all the files are similar, I will take care of all the rest, doing the exact same thing, the exact same instructions. By default, it says, oh, I'm going to use the first file, and that's fine. And then there's some criteria here about the CSV type of file. I don't even know all these type of codes, so I assume that it's correct, and usually it is. So don't need to worry about that. Just click OK. And so now Power Query is going to combine all the files. In this case, they were just 2 files, January and February, into one. And if we scroll down, we can see the dates here. We can see that those rows that we had at the top. And if we, so there's a limit. Here it says it's profiling based on the top 1,000 rows. Since we only have like around 200 rows each file, we are good. We can still see. But if they were very long files, we are only seeing a preview based on the very first 1,000 rows. But here you could change that, okay, to see on the entire data set. It will make your queries possibly slow to work with. So you can see, let's go up a little bit, February. So it combined the 2 files for us, but it's not so nice yet because January ends here, then it put those rows that we have at the top of February, and then the headings, and then February data starts here. And what I wanted was that these rows were ignored, and I wanted to have all the dates together in one column without interruptions and so forth. But we can do that, okay? Another thing that you need to notice is that here on the left, remember that I said it's where we have our queries. Before we had just one query, the one we were building. And now all of a sudden we have this collection of queries here. They are even organized inside one folder that says helper queries. Okay, what happened was that Power Query created this stuff. This is what it uses to understand what to do with all the files in the folder. So don't worry too much about that. What we need to know is that 2 things. One is that Power Query by default tends to add the change type step. There's a setting where we can eliminate that, but by default you will get this. And I'll talk about this later. The advice is, my advice is to change data types later as much as possible when you are building your query. So I'm going to delete this step there. Now, I want Power Query to join the files without these extra rows and so forth. So the way we have to explain it, what to do with the files, is to come here to this transform sample file. And in here, we get to work with this query and explain each step we want to be applied to each individual file. So first thing is, I don't want these top 3 rows. So I'm going to home, remove rows, remove top rows. And since all the files are very built the same way, I know there's always 3 top rows that I want to eliminate. So I put 3 there. Good. Now, the first row is not data, it's the headings. So by default, Power Query put as headings column 1, column 2, column 3, but I want it to be date, and then client, and then product code, and so forth. For that, we can come to home, use first rows as headers, and just like that, I now have all the names I had in the first row used as column names, column headers. Once again, Power Query went ahead and decided to do the change type step. I'm going to delete it from here, even because whatever we do here won't go to the main query. So we need to do that in the main query anyways. Okay, so now we explained to Power Query what we wanted to do with January's file. We could even go further. We could even say, hey, for example, this client column, I don't want the number of the client and the name together there. I want things separate. And at this point, we can either do this here or we can do this at the end. It will work the same way because at the end they will be here. We are explaining just for January, and so the transformation will be applied to January, and then to February, and then to March, and then everything will be combined after that transformation. The other option is that we are going to do is, okay, now that I have each file clean enough to be able to combine them, then I'll do the transformations after. Let's do that. So if I come to this query here, the main query that I started to build, before we were seeing January and then the February. In between January and February, we had those header rows in between. Now they are gone because we made the cleaning work here. Okay, so we are in a good way. I should have maybe do this so that we can see better. So now we can do any other transformations we want. Let's say, okay, I don't want the client name and ID together. So Power Query offers us a lot of tools here that you can explore. Some of the tools, they seem similar in the Transform tab and the Add Column tab. For example, the Extract button. The Extract button allows us to extract things before the delimiter, text before a certain delimiter. I have it here, but if I go to the Add column, I also have it there. It seems the same button, the same thing, but it does not do exactly the same thing. If I use it from here, applying to this column, it will maintain this column and will create a new column, like it says here, Add column. If I use it from here, that button, what it will do is it will transform this column. Okay, whatever it does, removes this column and replaces it with the result of that transformation. So let's say I just want to keep the client ID and I don't care about the client name. Let's imagine that. I can come to Extract and then text before the delimiter. I know that there's space dash space there. So the delimiter will be space dash space that I can click here and click OK. You see, the rest disappeared. I have my client ID here. I could even change the name if I wanted to and put client ID there. I have the product code, quantity, unit price. Let's say that I don't care about the payment type, so I can right click and remove. Okay. So let's imagine that these are the columns I am interested in at the moment. The last thing that we now should do is to indicate to Power Query what type of data is in each column. The reason for that is that, for example, here unit price, it's numbers these are numbers for the prices here. These are numbers for quantities, and we may want to do calculations with it. And if we leave the type undefined or not defined correctly, we may not be able to do calculations we want later after in the process. So I would say here, this is a whole number. It could be decimal as well, depending on the situation. The unit price, we can either use the decimal or the currency. The difference between the two is that the currency will always round to 4 decimal places. And that is good for performance. If we are working with very long sets of data, it makes that any numbers that were different past the 4 decimals, if they are rounded to the same number, it means that we have less different numbers to deal with. So using currency is more efficient than using decimal number data type. The currency, in fact, is called fixed decimal places, and it works with 4 decimal places. So in terms of efficiency, if you don't need to work with more than 4 decimal places, using currency data type is best than the decimal one, because it doesn't work with as many different numbers. And the client ID, it's a number. Sometimes it's good to format it as text, especially if you have leading zeros and you want to keep the leading zeros. For example, on employee ID 00333, you don't want it to be just 333 because maybe later you have other sets of data in your Excel files and you want to do the VLOOKUP, for example, to find, and then it's different there if it has the leading zeros there. So it's up to you to decide if it is a whole number or text. At the moment is defined as text. I'm going to put it as a whole number because in terms of efficiency, performance, again, if you are working with long sets of data, which is not the case today, the whole number in terms of memory demands less memory from Power Query than the text data type. So that's the thing there. Here we have a date, and despite the fact that we have dates written this way, if I do this and then choose date, Power Query is perfectly capable of identifying that text is referring to date values. Okay, and so that's it. So now we have everything together the way we wanted. The data is clean, is prepared, only has what we need. Oh, there's something here that I forgot. So product code is text. Product code is text. And if you see, I made a couple of changes with data type for data type, but there's only one step, change type here. And everything is recorded in one formula only. Here are the different data types indicated, okay? Just one step. Because it's the same operation, so Power Query combines everything in one step only instead of recording multiple similar steps. Okay, so the way to load this is go close and load to, and now I have different options. I have the option to load this to a table. I could load the data directly to a pivot table if I wanted to, a chart, pivot chart. Just leave as connection, meaning that I would be bringing the data to my Excel file, but it would not be visible in the grid. And I can also add this to the data model. I'm not going to talk about that today. So I'm going to choose the option table in existing sheet. Let's go put the data maybe here. Okay. And Power Query will load our data here. So if we come here, we will see that we have January and February and the dates there together. So for those of you who never used Power Query, what do you think of the power of it so far? If you want to leave your comments there, let me know. I want to. Then in the end we can discuss those. Let me know if you enjoyed the power that Power Query has. It's just all about power.
Yeah.
Any comments, Michael?
So there's a question, and just to also let you know, for noon, you have to be somewhere by noon.
Yeah,
so
I know. I won't be able to tell everything. I mean, yeah.
So,
I guess I'll be past noon a little bit. Is it okay for you to stay like 15 minutes more or so?
Oh, in fact, just not to be selfish, if you want to give us as many time as you are willing to add on top, we are.
Okay.
Yeah, it's only a program for me.
Okay, don't worry about me.
Thank you.
Okay, so but there was a question you said.
Yeah. Yes. So while you are doing the combining the files in the folder, so I think maybe it was too fast for her, or I don't know what, but our question is about that part. That how did we combine the two files in the folder?
So when we go, the first thing that you want to do to make sure that you combine things in a folder is the way you start. So here, data, get data from file, from folder here. When you choose this option, then the steps that come after that will be taking into consideration that you are wanting to do something with all the files in the folder. Okay. By default, it will be combining all the files there, but then you will be able to eliminate some of those files if you want to. I will explain one example in just a minute. Okay. I hope that explains. And then when after you go, it brings you to one. So for example, let me go back here. Data, get data from file from folder. Then here you point, find the folder you want, and when you say open, you get to this point. And here when you do transform data, you could do combine as well. You can try the different options you have there. And then after clicking this button here is when you get the opportunity, you will get these helper queries created automatically. And this one that says transform sample file is where you get to choose, explain what you want it to be done with just one file individually. Okay. But I'm going to close this. Whoever was asking, then watching the recording will be able to see with more detail and in a slow motion.
Interestingly, I think she got it. So she's replied that yes, she's gotten it. So while you were explaining, okay, she got what she missed.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, great. Okay, so let's imagine that with this data, I want to do different kinds of reports, and one of them involves creating a pivot table. So I click the table. The table, if you watch here, it has the same name as the query, except that it doesn't have space characters, so we have an underscore there. So when we come here to data and then not to data, to the table, insert pivot table. And I want to use this table, okay, and I want to put it here on the side. Let's imagine here. Okay. And let's imagine that I bring the dates to the columns, and I just want the months, so I take the date field out, and I want maybe the client in the rows and the sum of quantities bought. Let's imagine that. So we get January, February in the months, and then the different client ID numbers and the sum of quantities they bought in each one of the months. Okay, I'm going to save this just in case Excel decides to crash on us. So now let's test. Remember that I put those files on the side. Let's grab March file here and put it there. Okay. We have a button here at the in the data tab that we can, I can close these now and now, that we should be able to do refresh all, and this button should refresh all the tables coming from queries and also the pivot tables. If I do this, let's see what happens. I clicked it, something happened there. Our table got January, February, and March, but the pivot table only has January and February. Then if I click refresh all again, now I get the pivot table, January, February, and March there. Okay, so what's going on here? What's happening is that, unfortunately, by default, every query, when we built it, if we see the properties here, right, click and properties, there's one property here that says enable background refresh, and that is checked up with by default. If I uncheck that, if we have that checked on, a mark put there, what that means is that I'm saying, okay, when the query is updating, feel free to go ahead, Power Query and Excel, and do other stuff that you need to do. So what happens with the pivot table is that the pivot table is refreshing at the same time as the query is. But because the query takes longer, pivot table updates even before all the data is in. And we don't want that. That's why we had to refresh twice, because want to update here, refresh all twice. Once refresh the query and refresh the pivot table, but the pivot table went too fast, so there was no data, the data was not all in yet. And then the second time it refreshed the table, but there was not something else to refresh anymore. So now the pivot table had the data on the table from the previous refresh and was able to update. So what I mean is I want to take this off and tell Power Query the following. Hey, refresh the query. Then when that's done, it's when you are allowed to go and do your stuff with the pivot table. So we uncheck that. Let's come here and put one more month there and test. So if I grab April and put it there, the query is always pointing to that folder. So if I go refresh all, you see that now everything went well. We now get January, February, March, and April, both in the pivot table and in the table. So if you ever are working with queries and pivot tables and you come across the situation that you need to refresh more than once to get your pivot tables updated correctly, it has to do with that property that you need to uncheck. Okay. Another thing that you can do is in terms of the queries, let's imagine pointing to the folder. Let's imagine that every month you have a new file there, but you only want to look at the most recent file in the folder. So for that, what you can do is the very same query, double click there, it opens our query. Let's go to the very beginning, source, and in here, we have different information about the files. It still says January and February because it's working with an old preview. If we do refresh preview, now it gives us the current state of the folder. And we can say here in the date created or the date modified, depending on your business case. In my case, I want to look at the date the file was created. I don't want to consider any modifications. And I want to say, hey, I just want you to look at the most recent file. So here, we have date time filters. And there's an amazing array of options that we can play with when we need to filter columns, column dates, or columns with dates and times. One of them is latest. So let's just click that option. And it asks us, do you want to insert an extra step? Yes. Here, now we see that we only got the file for April, which was the one I created those files. Though all those were created yesterday for the purpose of this demonstration, but I created January 1st and then January, February, March, and so forth. So the April one is the one that was created later from those four, right? So what this does is that first, it excludes all the files that we have in the, not excludes, but ignores all the files that we have in the folder except the most recent one. And now everything will be done just based on that file. So at the end, we will only have data from April. And when we go close and load, if we now do a refresh all to also update our pivot table, we will see that we only have the data from the most current file. Doing one last testing, if now I get the May's file into there, now the most current file will be May, right? So if I come here and do refresh all, again, maybe it didn't work, refresh all, not working, why? Let me see if I put the file there. We have, or maybe let's see if there's a problem with the dates. Yeah, you see, for some, I know. So the date created, because I copied this file later, the date, maybe let me show you. That's Power Query is right. It's just doing exactly what I'm asking. If you look at the date created, the May file, which is the last one, has, because I copied it at a later stage. Let me go. It's not okay there. Oh, maybe no zoom. Maybe no zoom. It's not the latest one. That's why it's not refresh. It's refreshing with April because April is the latest one. So, and what about the date modified? Date modified, all were modified yesterday except this one that was modified today. So what we can do, just for the purpose of this demonstration, and just so that you see also the difference, is that in here, in that step that I said, filter the files to tell me to give me the date created equal latest. I'm deleting the step. I could amend the code there, but I'm going to repeat the step. Instead of doing with the date created, do with the date, let's do with the date modified, just to see that it updates. So refresh preview, we have the five files there, and all of them were modified May 8th, and May is May 9th. So, but in the business, usually we want to look at the date created, not the date modified, but you have to judge depending on the situation. So let's say filter, and then say date created, date modified is latest. Insert. Okay, so now it's grabbing the May file. Close and load. And if we do a refresh all, now we get May file, May data here and May data there. So that's a way of very convenient of having a folder where people can drop a new report every week or every month or every day, depending on the situation. And we can create our query to always look at certain reports only, certain files, if we don't want them to be combined, all combined. In this case, it's looking at only the most recent one. Okay, so I'm going to skip. I have more examples to show the power of using the different tools in Power Query to combine data. But since we are running late here, there are other things that I wanted to show to other people, to people who maybe are more familiar with this type of things. Any comments, Michael?
Okay, so no comments. I'm also checking, no questions. But what I wanted to say is I want to share your blog because I don't know if all what you've mentioned today are there, but I know that definitely it's something, it is the you that they will keep having after this session. So I want to quickly just share it on the Teams. So,
yeah, go ahead.
Are you ready for should I ask them to ask questions? Are you done with
I wanted to go to show something else okay. First, maybe 5 more minutes, and then we have questions. Okay.
Okay. Great.
Okay.
All right.
And then we can talk about the blog and the YouTube channel if they want to follow up, because there's so much content there that people can take advantage of.
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to show you here. This other file has a couple of more queries that I built that we could have built here live, but the time is limited to explain everything. If we come here to data and then queries and connections, we can see that we have the monthly reports as similar to what we just built. And then we have a products report that query that says connection only. And what it does is it is connecting to another file where I have a list of products, and it's bringing the products information. And then I have a third query that starts with merging the two queries together. The first one, the monthly reports, with the second one, the products. And putting the two together allows us to go and find information about the first one, the monthly reports, comes with the product code and the quantity and the unit price, but this is not necessarily the full price. And here in the products, we have more information like the name of the product, the size, etc., and the full price. And then combining the two, we can put everything together into just one report. Okay, so that is part of knowing how to build, how to use different Power Query tools. One of them is the merge queries that we have here. And there's plenty of content that for those of you who may have never done this, that you can find to learn how to do this. What I wanted to show you, and just remembering that the purpose of this, the main topic of this presentation is about productivity, is to share, in case you don't know, that there are very easy ways to copy queries from one file to another. So I just opened a new file, Excel file there, and I'm going to come here to data and open the queries and connections pane. And if you want to copy something from here to there, for example, the products, you can right click and then copy, and then come here, right click and paste. And that copies the exact same query into here. In this case, it's a query, it's a very simple one, just 3 steps, but sometimes you have queries where you put a lot of work. And so doing like this is very convenient so that you don't have to repeat everything. If you are interested in working with the code, you can do paste inside a Notepad, and you can have all the code there and then work with it, copy the code. The code would be is being stored here in the view and then advanced editor. Here is where the code is being written for you, but with the Notepad, you can make modifications and then copy and pasting it here, for example, if that's something you need. Another thing, I'm going to close this file, and I'm going to close this file new that I created. Another thing that, and just going to open a new file, blank. When you are copying queries from one file to the other, just going to put here the queries and connections again. Let's say that I'm copying the last one, the final report that comes from merging these two, and this one needs these others here. If I do right click and copy and come here, so I'm copying just the last one, you see that Power Query is clever enough to bring everything that is needed. And some of these were not transferred because they are not really needed to make these other ones work. Only this function here depends on the transform. This function is kind of a copy of this one. The only thing is that this one you can modify, and every time you modify this, the other one, the function updates. But if you are copying this one final query to there, it only needs the function to work. So it copies that one and copies whatever you need to put there to do your work. How do you know the queries each one depends on? If you double click and go to the query editor, here in the view, we have this button, Query Dependencies. And we can maximize this and center here. And here we have a schema of how things are connected. So if I click on the final, it highlights all the queries that the final needs to work. Okay, so these two were helper queries, but they are not really needed to make the final or to make the monthly report work. So if I click in this one, it highlights both the queries before and the queries that come after. There's other views here. You can see it's top to bottom, but if you prefer to see, for example, left to right, you can see the scheme organized like that. So that's another tip that I wanted to show you. If you still talking about recycling work, there's things that you can do. For example, let's say that in this monthly report, you want to copy everything from here, from the beginning until here. So you have the option of here, extract previous. And this will create a new query separate from this one. You can say what the name is that you want, for example, test. And this will create a new query that it's in here that has all the steps until that one where you clicked before. Okay. Same thing if you are here and you don't want, you will have a bunch of steps until the end that you don't want. You can right click and say delete until end. Okay. And everything is gone, much easier than having to delete step by step. Okay. So that's another tip. And then there's duplicate queries and reference queries that we don't have time to approach the difference between those two things today. And that's it. There was a lot more things that I wanted to share with you, but because I wanted to not leave those who are with Power Query, just starting with Power Query, not leave those behind, I chose to put more focus on the steps of the power, the possibilities that Power Query gives us, so that more people can start enjoying Power Query since now. So if today I was able to at least convince some of you that never used Power Query or very little, and convince you to spend some time to learn and to practice, that's my purpose. And I'm sorry to those of you if you wanted to go deeper into more advanced tips. Maybe we can do some session another time, or feel free to check my YouTube channel, because I'm constantly sharing different techniques there every week. So I think the most important thing is to make people aware of what Power Query can do and how to use it and how to start using. And the great thing about it is that don't be afraid, because whatever you do here in these queries, it's not affecting your data. So the steps don't modify anything where your data is. In this case, the data is in files on a separate folder. All those are untouched. You can do all the experiments you want here with different steps. Nothing of that will damage your data. So it's even better than, for example, when we are working with VBA, because VBA can overwrite things that we have in our spreadsheets. That's not the case with Power Query. So it's totally secure to try, to test, to experiment, because it won't affect anything in your data, that your data is safe there. Okay, let me go just through my slides and tell you what I have in mind, and then I can pass you the deck and people can explore some information that I have here. So we were here and I talked a little bit about recycling work. I didn't talk about move and organizing, but most of these things I talked about it. Some pitfalls it's about filtering. So when you are using filters, you need to be careful about the data bar, the formula that the M code generates, because some of the things may not be exactly as you need, but no time for that. Here you can watch a video with an example of how important it is to start paying attention to the M code and little by little start to learn it. It's not difficult. It's not easy either, but with time you get acquainted to it. So there's a slide with different learning resources and information about Power Query and M language. How to learn, be curious. Always try to improve your processes. Maybe this month you build something, next month you can improve some of the steps. And where to find the code here, okay? And there's also information about the performance. So very briefly, if you have the option of having your data either in CSV format or Excel files, choose the CSV format, because there's a lot of advantages on that. There's 2 articles here that you can read that have to do with this topic. And that's it. So we can go on questions, but I can tell you right away, there's the Meetup. I'm going to put this in the comments in case someone wants to look at it. The Meetup in Toronto, if you want to check it there. And Michael will be our next speaker, not the very next. We have John Peltier the next this week. And then next week, next month, we will have the privilege of Michael's presenting to us. So feel free to check that, and feel free to join us if the time is convenient to you. I'm going to put the link there in the chat, and you can check our Meetup. This is my YouTube channel. This particular playlist, if you go to playlists and see check report Excel report automation live classes, this is where you can find, these are long classes, usually more than 1 hour. And I go very in detail about different things. A lot of the classes are about Power Query. Celia Alves, Solve Excel. Putting the link there. Feel free to check that, to subscribe if you want. I'm not sure if the link went as a link, but you can try to copy it. I'll put it there later. Okay. What else? So that's it. That's my contact information. I can leave it up there just for a little moment. You can take a picture if you want. Or then you can, I don't know if Michael will be able to send you the PDF file that slides. And if that's the case, you can check the information from here.
Okay, great. I will. I'm not sure if you've given us yet, right? It will be after this session you give us the slides, right?
Yes, I can. No, I have not sent it yet.
Okay.
I will send it to you, and then you can make available on Meetup or whatever the means you use usually.
Okay.
Putting up my blog here that you were mentioning.
Oh yes, I also did it. So I grabbed also the Excel automation live playlist. I think the one you pasted didn't paste.
Okay. Thank
so
you.
I pasted it again, so
Yeah.
it's showing.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So feel free to check all these resources. Feel free to leave questions there in my YouTube channel if you have particular problems that you are not being able to solve. If it is something that I can help you with, maybe I'll do a video about that when I have the opportunity. So feel free to connect on LinkedIn or on the Meetup. I'm available for you. Okay.
Okay. So I know we've taken more of your time than we should, especially today being a special deal for you.
Yeah.
It's Mother's Day, happy Mother's Day, and there are people waiting for you, so we are kind of holding you back. So I'm not going to ask the audience again for more questions. I know you've covered a lot, and you've given us these slides, and you've answered all the questions that have come up until now. So I would just rather let us hear from you about the questions we always like to ask every special guest we bring, which is number one. How has it been your journey? We would like to know, how you got from. I believe there would have been a time when you didn't even know Excel. So how did you go from maybe not knowing to being this very, very good, and your career is built around this?
Thank you for the question. No, it has not been 3 more minutes. It has not been a long time since I started with Excel. Well, I started using Excel in the first year as a teacher. That would be 1994. But for 20 years, I used it like I knew the sum, I knew to multiply some cells, I knew some conditional formatting, count if. I didn't even know VLOOKUP. I used Excel for 20 years without knowing VLOOKUP. And that happened around 2014 or 15. And after that, I was working at a company. But I thought I knew a lot of Excel because at my school, I was the queen of Excel. I was the one coming to the teachers' meetings with my spreadsheets and my charts, and no one else knew how to do that. So I was the queen of Excel, and I was convinced that I knew it all. So when I was hired for a work because I said I knew a lot of Excel, and they believed me, and because I was so convinced that I must have been convincing as well to them. And the owner came to me and said, well, we have these systems in Excel with some automation, and now I wanted to have more features in it. Okay. So I went to see it, and it was full of VBA and index and match and all types of weird formulas. And what is this? So I went home and I said, okay, I'll do it. So I went home and I started studying very, very hard. I took a few courses online on my own with my money, not paid by my boss. And I took all the time I had. At that time, I was studying, I was working part-time, and I was taking care of my kids by myself because my husband was working as a long-haul truck driver at the time, so he was away from home most of the time. And I don't know where I could find the time, but I found some time available I would start very early in the morning, wake up very early, and would go and study. And I started to learn VBA, and less than a year after I left the company because there was nothing else there for me to automate. And this company was related to bookkeeping and accounting, and I was not interested in learning bookkeeping, so I left. And I went to do the same type of work for another company and a different business area industry. They were buying and selling and renting shipping containers, so totally different industry, but they were running their inventory, their operations, everything with Excel, but manually. So one friend that worked there knew the work that I was doing with Excel and invited me to work there. And I was there for about 18 months until I automated everything there. Even sending emails from Excel and all that fun stuff with VBA mostly. And from there, I decided to start doing this work as a consultant. And that's what I've been doing since 2018. And 2019, I started a Meetup group here in Toronto, and I started to be invited to speak at different places. And so a friend in early 2020 decided accepted to nominate me for MVP, and that's how it all happened. So that's the short version of the story.
So, yes, it's interesting because you're the one firing yourself out of you're the one getting yourself out of jobs.
Exactly.
Like you take a job and you make your job no longer relevant for yourself anymore because you automate everything.
So there's two different types. So for example, if you are an accountant, you have other work to do. It's accounting. You need to do accounting, right? But if you learn how to automate things with Excel, you will have a lot more time to do what you need to do in your field. In my case, what I do like is Excel. I mean, I don't care about accounting. I don't care about finance. I don't care. I like knowing different things about that, and I do enjoy learning the workflows, the business cases, in each case, understanding how the company works and where comes each piece of information from and how they need to put that together. And what I do like is not learning accounting or operations or human resources or payroll. I've been learning a little bit of all that because I need to learn to provide them with the solutions. And that's what I really enjoy doing, is creating the machines that you push a button and it generates, does the work for people. I do like Excel and all the automation stuff. So my background is in mathematics. I think it helps me a little bit with the logics and reasoning. But as that same background tells about me, is I like solving problems. So that's what I do, or I try to do.
Great. So the last question, so we can let you go. Interestingly, there's someone in the audience who I'm sure she's already taking a lot of inspiration from what you're saying, because her career path is almost similar to yours. Her name is Gloria, so I'm sure maybe soon.
I'll read the comments. Yeah.
Okay, so the last question, so we can let you go, is someone starting right now. What's your advice? What would be your advice for someone starting right now?
I think that what makes us learn is having real problems on hands to solve. So I advise people two things. One is to find courses that to learn what you are interested in, if it is the beginning, the basics of Excel, or VBA, or more advanced formulas, or charting, or dashboards, or Power Query. There's all these type of different areas that you can invest your time in, depending the position you are at the moment. But the courses really help you understanding things in a more organized and structured way than just following YouTube channels, which is good too. But I think it's important to have a more structured learning through courses. And so that's one thing. The other thing is find real situations for you to solve. It could be in your work, with your family, with your friends, with non-profit organizations, or if not, join forums where people write questions about Excel, and help those people finding solutions for those problems. Because while you are trying to help others, you have a specific situation that you need to solve. That's exactly what would happen to you if you were at work working with Excel. You have a problem that has exactly those certain requirements. Try to help that people. And if you cannot, go through the answers of those who reply and find a solution. And little by little, you will build a better understanding of all the different components of Excel and how to put them together.
Well, thanks a lot. Tell me, I can see your hand is up. Hope it's a short question. So quickly unmute and let her hear if it's something that is short enough. Tell me your hand is up. Going? We're going. Okay, maybe she's not.
Maybe it was by mistake. Sometimes people click the button by mistake.
Okay. All right. So thank you very, very much. We're very grateful, and it's been a pleasure. And I want to say Happy Mother's Day, and thank you for the. In fact, I learned a lot, and I just wanted to go have the whole day, have a good day with everyone that is waiting for you. And we apologize for keeping you this long.
Worries. So, no, my fault. I wanted to teach you the entire Power Query today, but I can't. So thank you so much for the opportunity, Michael. I hope it was useful for those of you here, and feel free to connect with me and follow the content there on the YouTube channel, because there's a lot more there going on every week. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye bye, Michael.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye.